Okay, so talking a little bit about those request methods. Request methods will require, there's a request method is required. It's going to tell the server what action we want to occur as a result of this request. Colloquially, I can never say that word, referred to as an HTTP verb, okay? Kind of like we said we said methods in Java were usually written as names that were verbs, and it's the first element of the request line. Okay, so here's a couple of those. We're going to really focus on 4. Okay, so support for 2 of the request methods is required for a server to be compliant with HTTP. Okay, so the server needs to account for a GET and a POST. And the GET says that we're going to retrieve a resource from the server. Okay, if there's data out there on the server that is not necessarily going to be a problem with my URL line, including a couple pieces of information that get me to that data, so that on the server, so the server can then respond to that. What we're saying is that the GET request comes in asking for a specific resource from the server. And the GET request would be the one that would not have a body. Now, a POST request is this would be used if you wanted to create a new resource on the server. The body section, there is a body section included, and that contains the data needed to create the new resource on the server. Okay? So if I have a list of employees that I hold on my server, maybe in a database, and I'm an HR application and I have a company that's purchased my API and they hire a new employee, they're going to want to send over some specific information about that employee, which would go in the body of the request as opposed to the URL of the request. This way, the information about that person can be hidden from public view, but come to us as a body of a POST request, and we can go ahead and manage that and take that information. So if you picture, we have this request coming in, right? Now we're going to need to possibly map all of that data to a Java POJO, which we can then use on our system to go and update our database. Now, on the flip side of that, if we have already entered in the 250 employees into the database, maybe the caller might want to call us to get some specific information about that person. In that case, they could feasibly do a GET request, and they might use a particular identifying part to put in the URL, and they wouldn't need a body in that request. They would simply add the identifying item. As long as it's not going to be personal information or anything secure, you could actually just send that over and get that information back from the server. So if you can see where the body is important, we'll take in a POST request to possibly add the person, and then we might get the GET request to retrieve that person. Ultimately, you want to think about what is visible to the public in your request. And if you need information that's going to be sent that should be private, you're going to want to send it in a method that will have the body available. Okay, now 2 additional request methods that we're also going to focus on. These are commonly used in web services, is the PUT, which updates an existing resource on the server, and this has a body section that contains the data needed to update the existing resource on the server. Okay, so PUT and POST are relatively similar, okay? And then the 4th one is delete, and this deletes a resource on the server, okay? Now the delete is more similar to the GET, because if we can send that delete with some specifying information about which member to delete, our API can accept that, find that member in the database, and and do what it needs to do. But in other words, it's not going to need that member's information because that member's information is already stored in the database. We're specifically instead going to delete it. We'll see a lot more about these. We're going to use these throughout the rest of the course. So you will be very familiar. And for right now, we just want you to start getting familiar with the 4 most important that we will use, and that is get, post, put, and delete.